This is a good time. This team is on the right track, and they probably need to hear a new voice after 3 years of the rebuild, and this is totally my decision.
That's the voice of Dwane Casey as he steps away from the head coaching position at the Detroit Pistons to take a job in the front office. Plus, Dutch Girl Donuts, their old building, it's up for sale. And then finally, a look at Detroit City FC's landmark loss to Louisville City FC. All of that is on your Daily Detroit for Monday, April 10th, 2023, a sunny and warm day in the Motor City. I'm Jer Stays, and our show shares what to know and where to go in Metro Detroit. And when sports are the thing, Fletcher Sharp steps up and takes a swing. Good to talk to you, sir.
Yeah, good to be back on.
Before we get into it, this just broke right before we are starting recording. It is, I think, really the true total end of Dutch Girl Donuts as the building on Woodward, just south of 7 Mile, is up for sale. I feel like you and I both had a lot of affection for the place, and it was closed. We knew it was done, but it really feels like an end of an era when the building's up for sale.
It's really sad. It's been around since, before for me. It opened in 1947, so it's like a real institution. I know people use that word a lot for stuff around places, and it's like, well, this place has only been around since 1998 or something. This place has been around for a while. It's been around, throughout all the Detroit riots and such. And just the fact that, places can't last forever, but the reasoning that they closed due to COVID and then just not being able to pay people the full wages they needed really bums me out. So to hear that the building's being sold, it's kind of like you said, it's closing the chapter on Dutch Girl Donuts, which you really would have hoped would have been closed because maybe an owner passed away and maybe they're done with donuts. But it really was the fact that they just couldn't afford to stay open anymore, which is really a shame.
Unpopular opinion, I feel like I would have paid more for the donuts. I don't know if everybody else would. I don't know if it would change the product or the clientele, but I feel like I do now pay more for donuts when I have donuts.
If you're talking $1 or so more, I'm sure people would agree. If you're one donut is $6 now, no one's doing that. That's crazy California prices for one thing that you're going to need to come back for. So imagine getting a half dozen or a dozen, and next thing you know, they're just taking all your clothes and you're walking out naked with donuts because you're happy with that.
I'd do it.
The donuts were great. The memories I have of going there and just waiting was great. I remember when they opened up briefly during COVID and I stopped in to get something and the line was so long. There were people right next to Dutch Girl, the street you can't turn down. It's a one-way going the other way. People were flying down that street the wrong way to try to turn around and park. It's up the lines, to the corner. I got to get down this street real quick and turn around so I can park and get out real quick. People were trying to be all friendly and nice so they could cut in the line with you. It was a legit, people were going to go buy Jordans. People were going to go buy Buffs or something. It was just donuts, but people were going to go buy some luxury item they need to get in a long line for. Yeah, it stinks, but the long and short of it is pay your people and then people will stay. If you can't pay people, then obviously your business will suffer, even if you are an institution like Dutch Girl Donuts.
Well, it's hard because of the market, right? Like you were just talking about, there's only a so high of a price that people will pay for those donuts. And that's part of why we're having so many issues with losing things in this post-pandemic time. There's been a ton of closures lately. And part of it is that you've got an entire kind of price realignment. And there are pluses and there are negatives to that. So with that said, where are you going for donuts? I've got a couple of nominations. I feel like we're going to share one of them.
Oh, yeah, because it's right by me. Yellow Light Donuts.
Yeah.
Kind of a different type of donut, but still, to me, honestly, I'm probably going to be unpopular here. A good donut's a good donut. I don't really care if it's just regular, if it's extra cakey, if it's a good donut's a good donut. Yeah, Yellow Light's donuts are not more the traditional type where it's just a donut. They have more specialty types. But if you make a good specialty donut, I don't care. You can make it out of tires and I'll still eat it if it's that good.
See, I like to run up there and I grab some donuts, grab a breakfast sandwich, or grab a donut, grab a breakfast sandwich and a nice coffee. And I like to check out the progress over there at AB Ford Park or somewhere in Jefferson Chalmers. My second nomination, I'll raise you with the nomination. I don't know if you know it. I'm on good authority that if you want a pretty similar donut, and it's my experience, a pretty similar donut is over at Donut Cutter in Berkeley. Now, if you're already on Woodward, It's not that bad of a jaunt if that's your thing. But if you're coming from the east or west, you got to do a different route. But it's still off of Woodward. It's a little bit up. It's in the suburbs, but it's still a very old school place. You're going to want to get there early because they're pretty popular too. But I feel like that's it for now, number 2. And of course, I feel like we should take nominations from people.
Yeah, not to be that guy also, you mentioned it, but Progress and AB Ford Park run diametrically opposite of each other.
Well, they're putting in that giant community center.
I do know that, and I do know they've been trying to do it for a minute. As someone who plays soccer there, the DCFL, the amount of times we've gone there for a game and the field has been up to our knees, and they're like, well, what can you do? And then you ask them if you can cut it yourself, and they're like, no, we'll cut it when we get to it.
And if it's true the city doesn't let you cut that or put together a group, that's awful.
That was a wild part for us is we had a game and someone who lived close by is like, I have a riding mower. I can literally ride it down the street and be here. And the city was like, no, that's our responsibility. We'll take care of it. It's like, well, we have a game in 20 minutes. So is someone coming right now? They're like, well, no. And it's like, okay, can we cut it? And they were like, no. We sneakily did it anyways real quick and then got off the field. But yeah, they really don't want you cutting the grass. They want to do it themselves, but they also just don't want to do it.
Well, they don't want to admit they can't.
I mean, I think that's like a human thing too, is sometimes it's hard to admit that maybe we're stretched a little too thin at certain parts and maybe we don't have the facility to do this. But if we tell you that, then you're going to use it against us. So no, we'll just do it when we get to it.
All right, let's get into the sports news as we mourn over our sugared treats. Let's talk about Dwane Casey, top of the show. You heard his voice. Lots of listener feedback even before we got into this, like listener comments coming in, text messages, all that stuff. Do you want to start there or do you want to start with a couple of your first blush thoughts?
I mean, first thoughts on this whole situation, it's expected. You kind of could tell near the end of last year that, he had some inkling that if they could not get out of the tank mode, that probably would be it. When Cade goes down after 12 games, people are very much like, yeah, they're definitely tanking. I mean, good on him for trying to finish it through. I mean, he's an older coach.
65, right?
Yeah, I know that typically you reach those points, especially with his CV of coaching for some pretty decent teams. I'm sure he kind of wanted to do well, especially with his young core. But kind of like the GM said, you don't really want to rush things. I know people really want them to be good soon because they have a bunch of young players, but Troy Barnes said they only get one shot to do this. So they got to do it correctly. But the flip side, and was part that I hate about American sports, but it will benefit the Pistons, is they have a 14% chance to land the number 1 draft pick. And this year's number 1 draft pick is someone that people think could be generational talent, and Victor Wembanyama. There's even a clip of him missing a 3-point shot, rebounding it in the air and dunking it. Very long guy. Could really help. I'm skeptical of him because he's 7 foot, but also weighs less than I do. That worries me. Also a little skeptical because while there have been some European stars who've come over and played great, Giannis in Milwaukee, Luka Doncic in Dallas. France is not necessarily the hotbed of basketball. It's getting better.
I think Killian Hayes is going to go play for the national team in the offseason.
Hopefully the Pistons do get him. He can help turn around this drop and they get a little bit better. I don't know. I'm a little skeptical on the number 1 overall pick.
All right, let's get into these listener comments because, man, as far as sports goes, I don't think I've ever gotten this many just like flowing in. I will go ahead and hit through them. And if you want to talk about one of them, just stop me. Joel says, when seriously will the rebuild end? This team is awful.
Yeah, they're a young team. The rebuild's happening this year. I thought there was maybe a dark horse chance they might make the playoffs. But when Cade got hurt, now your leading player is a rookie who's learning his way about the league, and Jaden Ivey, who's a talented player, still developing his jump shot, but a talented, exciting slasher. And Jalen Duren, who's a 19-year-old with the body of like a 30-year-old, very strongly built guy. But again, he's 19, so he's learning.
Don says, if we don't get Wembanyama, we're effed.
I don't necessarily agree with that. Looking at the players who are near the top, Scoot Henderson's a guard who I don't think the Pistons need unless they're going to get rid of Killian Hayes. Because what's the point of getting a third guard 3 years in a row? Scoot Henderson's really, really great to watch. But you will not see many clips of him hitting step-back jump shots unless it's to prove a point. You'll see clips of him going to the hoop, laying the ball up, dunking, pointing and laughing, but his jump shot is not there yet.
Thomas says it's about time. Bobby shares that MF should have been gone 3 years ago. Sorry.
Dwane Casey was part of the plan to help rebuild. He's good at developing young players. Pistons have had coaches in the past who see a young player and go, no, thank you. Notably Larry Brown, who Had he played Darko earlier, we would have realized Darko was that bad, but he elected just not to play him because he does not play young players. Dwane Casey is the opposite. If he has a young player who can play, he will give him the time to play, albeit to a fault sometimes, where it's like, okay, maybe take the guy out. He's making mistakes. And Dwayne's like, no, leave him in. He'll learn as the lead grows to 25 or something. So I understand why they kept him. It was to help with these players. And the reason why even Dwane Casey is moving to a front office position with the Pistons, that shows that he's still going to be there to help them grow. I think he was the right coach for this decision.
Yeah, Ryan says he's not sure why we want him in the front office.
I think he's pretty good at helping to identify talent. I'm not saying that he's the best, but having someone like Troy Barnes handle that, and then having Dwane, who has extensive knowledge of these players from a face-to-face perspective, will help you in terms of how their development will go.
Mike says, about time, the team has regressed, especially on defense. I feel like that's unfair because it's a rebuild.
Yeah, I mean, they're young. The team's going to regress defensively. They're young kids. Cade Cunningham is about 21. Jaden Ivey's under 21. Jalen Duren's under 21. Killian Hayes is 21. Obviously, you signed a few players like Bojan, Hamidou Diallo, Corey Joseph. You signed a few players who've been pros before, but none of them have been really great defensively. They've been on the team to be on teams. So yeah, obviously your main players defensively are really young players. They're going to struggle a bit because they're learning how to be professional players day in and day out.
Gerald says, thank God. And Greg, he was like garden hire until we got serious again. For listeners who don't know, that was referring to a former Tigers manager that was kind of considered by some as a placeholder.
Well, I thought Ron Gardenhire was going to come here and do great. He took Joe Mauer, Justin Morneau, and a bunch of baseballs in Minnesota and made them a playoff team. So I figured he could come here, do something similar with the Tigers, or at least help develop some players. And in a way he did, but also, again, he didn't really have much to work with. You can't always turn chicken poop into chicken salad. And unfortunately, there's one of the situations with the Tigers where he didn't. I think Dwane Casey should have stayed on to do that because at least he started it. Now he can finish it, close the book, move on to somebody else who now has a chance to, I don't want to use this over-the-top metaphor, but take the ashes of the Phoenix and watch it soar into something else.
See, I think he'll be able to do that in the front office. I think the other issue to this, a 55-year-old Dwane Casey stays. A 65-year-old Dwane Casey, it's time to change gears. Because the NBA, any pro sport, it's a grind. Whatever pro sport, we've watched these coaching teams, whether it's the Lions, heck, Detroit City FC, it's so many games. It is so much effort. It is a huge physical grind. And I mean, he keeps in great shape, but at some point in your life, I was listening to a thing with Huel Perkins, and he's up there in age too, in the same kind of bracket, a little bit older. At some point, that daily grind, it's enough, and you realize that you really actually, I believe him when he said when Dwane said, I wanted to take a front office job and, I want to take a job and see my family more. I believe him because when you're 65, it's a whole different story than when you're 55 or 45.
I'm glad they weren't like, you know what? I know you're getting older. You're fired. Sorry. And we'll let someone else take care of, the tanking years. I'm glad they let him stay on to kind of impart some elderly knowledge to some of these younger players who are still trying to learn about how to be pros. A coach of the year, an NBA coach of the year winner. I want my kids, if I have a kid who's playing professional sports under a coach, I want them to learn from that guy because that guy clearly has done something right in his career to win an award like that.
I don't want to dwell on it a ton because it's so early in the process and in this whole thing, but there was one name that a lot of listeners came up with as a possible replacement, and that is Jerry Stackhouse. He is the current head coach at Vanderbilt and, of course, has long-time ties. Thoughts on that one?
I like Jerry Stackhouse. I've always liked Jerry Stackhouse. He's a dependable player when he played, wanted to get involved in the community, pretty straightforward, and him taking a job at Vanderbilt is pretty admirable. But his head coaching career currently is 61-69. The furthest he's gone in the postseason is NIT quarterfinals twice. I don't know, man. Maybe get to 500 before we start talking about you taking an NBA head coach job.
I feel like he's one stepping stone away from it.
Yeah.
Right? You do Vanderbilt for a while, then go up to a bigger squad with a little bit more pressure, get a little bit more seasoning, and then ready for the NBA. Maybe there's something that they see that I don't, because I honestly don't watch Vanderbilt on the regular.
Nobody does. Nobody watches Vanderbilt on the regular. There was a point in their history where they used to be pretty decent, pretty good. And that point is gone. I hope if they get somebody, it's someone who can gel with this team and kind of help them grow into being better players and not just be good for like 2 years and all of a sudden, sink back to mediocrity.
So do you have a name in your mind?
Kind of I do, but he's annoying. Mark Jackson, former broadcaster, former NBA player, the coach who kind of helped assemble Golden State's current team. They just weren't really winning because he had them hyper-focused on defense. His offensive schemes really weren't that great. They were very kind of meat and potatoes. When you have players like Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, you can get a little bit more creative with your play calls like Steve Kerr kind of has with them. But Mark Jackson's first thing is defense. Hard-nosed, tough defense. With young players, especially some young athletic players like Ivy and Duran and Cade Cunningham, while he's not, a defensive juggernaut, he is 6'7", 6'8" as a point guard. Having someone like that and having to learn from one of the best point guards in the NBA at distributing the ball in Mark Jackson, that definitely can't hurt you at all.
All right, let's talk Detroit City FC. I feel like this was the inflection game. The loss against Louisville City FC 1-0. The scoreline did not betray the unbalancedness of this game. Nate Steinwasser showed to me, and I think you agree, that he is the best goalkeeper in the USL Championship in the league. You can't blame the weather. This raises some pretty serious questions 5 championship games in for LaRouge this year.
If you have the best goalkeeper in the league, that's totally fine. But if he's the best goalkeeper, it means your defense is not good. And vice versa. If you have the best defense in the league, your keeper, while it's a part of that defense, can't be the best keeper because we're not sure where his stats start and where the defensive stats end.
Well, that's the worrying thing to a bit because, in fact, everyone talks about how good Detroit City's defense is, but not only do we have real problems in our offense, but our defense isn't together either.
Yeah, there were a few times where they made a few improper reads. One specifically where it was very obvious from an outside perspective, and I'm sure on the field they probably knew it might have been coming too. When Brian Ownby released early in the first half, released behind the defense and got him fed a nice through ball, was left one-on-one with Nate, and Nate made an amazing stop on him. Straight up, like I was counting that as a goal. Brian Ownby is one of the better players in the league. He gets you one-on-one. Typically, he puts it in the net. It happened again. Wilson Harris had a chance. Thankfully, his shot was pulled wide. Nate kind of got in his head a little bit. But those are two instances where, like, it should have been 2-0 early on in the game. Like, the game should have been killed off right then for DCFC. Thankfully for them, it wasn't. Recently, in the Rio Grande Valley, bad pass goes backwards. Taylor Davia takes it, goes coast to coast, lays a nice little ball into the left corner. Nate can't stop it. This weekend, a corner comes in. Yazid Matthews heads it out. It falls to Dylan Maris. I won't name names, but one defender literally puts his hand on Wilson Harris, which means that is your guy. And then 2 seconds later, lets Wilson Harris run right by him to stab the ball into the net. It's not clearing the ball. It's not marking your guy. It's not communicating. It's not, I don't know what it is, but it's always some small mistake that dooms Detroit and then they lose 1-0. And the way that they play, which is very slow, very counterattack wise, you cannot afford to make mistakes like that. If you're going to make mistakes like that, you have to score. It was an optimal chance during that game. Ben Morris spun by Josh Winder, and I was honestly surprised he did that because Josh Winder is on his way to Benfica in Portugal, who regularly play in the Champions League.
I saw that, and I was like, okay, that's the Ben Morris I was hoping to see.
Yeah, he went right by him and then had a decent chance on goal and just pulled it wide. I don't know if it was a pass, if it was a shot.
He pulled it wide against Gold Star, too, because that Gold Star match that's the other combo. Like, you see the squeak by of Gold Star, which shouldn't have happened. And then you see this, and you realize you put the two pieces together.
Not even just a squeak by, honestly, and I hate to say this, I really do. Gold Star had like 4 big blown chances.
Let's focus on solutions, because changes have to be made.
They don't really have the capital right now, it at least appears, to make some of those moves, or else they probably would have made them. They brought in players who they expected to be doing big things, and I know like there's still some cohesiveness issues, but like I'm not going to lean on that entirely because, like I said last time, as a professional player, your cohesion like level like needs to it's a lot shorter. You don't get a long time to build it. So honestly, in terms of attacking, I don't know what they do to fix it because they have the people they said that they wanted. They have the players here who they wanted, and those players are not putting the ball in the net. So unless they have some secret investor who has a bunch of money that we don't know about, maybe playing some players in maybe a few different positions just so they can do something a little bit different. I'm not saying, like take your defenders and put them up top or something. But like maybe someone like Skage, who's playing maybe a little bit too further up top for me, maybe you drop him down to like attacking mid position where like he can affect the game with his feet way more than like his shooting because he's not really a goal scorer. But like, I don't know what it is. Losing 1-0 typically means like you were in the game somewhat. And with these 1-0 games with Detroit, like that's really not been the case at all. And no one wants to watch their team lose 1-0 15 times in 1 year. I know the midfield's an issue. I know that they have to skip over a lot of it to get the ball deep downfield. Maybe some shuffling there. I'm not really sure what. They're in a really big rut right now, and they're facing a not really good run of games coming up to where they need to kind of figure it out, because if they don't, they definitely are not making the playoffs.
So we've got Miami FC next.
Yeah, the Miami FC.
Oh, I forgot the sorry.
Yeah, they take it really seriously.
It's like Ohio State, but not.
One of the few teams who is underneath Detroit in the standings, but they are just so at 10 to Detroit's 9. Honestly, I'm kind of surprised that they're where they are right now. Led by Paco Craig and Joaquin Rivas. They can surprise you. I know that Detroit's ahead of them in the standings, but Detroit has not beaten the Miami FC in any capacity in their history. Last year, tying 1-1, taking a game late until like 93rd minute, making one defensive mistake and giving up a goal, then losing last year 1-0 at home on a ball that was assisted by current Detroit City FC player Richie Ballard. I don't know. I don't have a prediction for this one because you'd like to think on paper that they would be fine, but they've shown many times that they are not fine. Miami has given up 6 goals this year, so that's kind of helpful. There's a chance maybe Detroit could pounce on that, but Detroit's only scored 3, and all 3 of them came in one game against a very mistake-prone team in El Paso. I will say this, maybe the only person having a bit of a worse than Detroit, is former Detroit player Antoine Hopino, who went to Hartford Athletic to be closer to family and play closer to where most of his family is. And Hartford retooled their entire team to be really fearsome, and they are currently 0-2-3, giving up 11 goals. And Hopino has not had a game above a 7 rating on FOTMob, which is a good rating this entire year. And honestly, watching him on the field, he does not look like the Hopino from last year. He looks like someone who's like, yikes, have I made a mistake?
All right, before we go, you wanted to mention something cool that you went to.
Through a few people associated with DCFC and the DCFL, the Detroit City Football League, which is the recreational league. They've started the Women Plus Soccer Detroit. She, They Soccer Detroit is their Instagram. She, They Soccer DET. All one word. And they are putting together some little pickup soccer games on the weekends, Sundays in particular, April 9th, April 16th, April 23rd, April 30th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at 3800 Shane Street, Detroit. It's a nice little field. And honestly, it's mainly for she and they and queer plus people in the city and in the region. But it's really for anyone who loves the sport of soccer and wants to learn. All skill levels available. If you've never played the sport before, you just want to show up and watch, you can come and learn a few things, just have some fun, listen to some music. If you're really good, you can show up there too. Like, don't be a jerk and try to dribble through everybody and score a goal and celebrate by playing a vuvuzela or something. I went this last weekend and honestly it was just really refreshing to see so many people learning about the sport and just wanting to have fun and just learn. So again, She, They Soccer DET on Instagram. Women Plus Soccer Detroit, April 9th, 16th, 23rd, and 30th, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. at 3800 Shane Street in Detroit. 18 plus in age, and it's a really fun time. And if you just want to go and kick the ball around, get some nice sun rays to fall down on you while you do that, you should definitely go next Sunday.
All right, Fletcher Sharp, so good to talk to you.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
With that, I am Jer Stays. Thank you so much to our members, patreon.com/dailydetroit for supporting us. We have our newsletter, dailydetroit.substack.com, where we're sharing updates as well. Remember that you are somebody, and we'll see you around Detroit.